talked about the fears. You talked about some of the things that you try to overcome, and it looks like your boss told you, "Hey, that must have been one fear. Like, hey, go ahead and get this thing going, or we're done here." But
Yeah.
then what? Along with those fears, what were the misconceptions of automation back then? And like, what is it? And I'm guessing there is a lot of correlation to what we're seeing today with AI in testing. But we're not gonna go there yet. I'm just curious. Like back in late '90s, when you both were jumping into the deep end of automation, what are some of the things that people misunderstood that ended up being more like that an actual myth or something that it didn't become reality?
Uh, for me personally, because it was new and people had just been doing manual testing, I just don't think anyone believed that there was going to be any real value that was going to come from it. And then there was also some of the that automating would take too much time, like the initial upfront work that would need to be done would not be work on the back end, right? And so it was really just getting managers and stuff like that to see that it was worth the time and effort. And one way that I was able to prove that was we used to do quarterly releases, and when we did this quarterly release, it would be like an all hands on deck within the company for like a week. And I was able to show that by automating, we had this huge Excel spreadsheet that had all of these things that needed to be done in order for it to be, deemed like good enough to go for the quarterly release. I had started, once I had gotten the green light to go and stuff like that, I had gotten a fair amount of that spreadsheet automated, and I was able to show the company, I was able to kind of break down, all right, this is roughly how much you're paying for that week of all hands on deck, because it wasn't just the QA. We were bringing in other members of the company, analysts and implementation specialists and stuff like that. And I was able to show, hey, we were able to whip that down to 3 days. There was, by me being able to automate a certain percentage of that spreadsheet that you had, we only need two tester that was handling some of the newer stories that had been brought in that had not been automated yet. And I was able to show, but look how much we were able to cover with just the tool. So that was probably the biggest thing that I was able to do to kind of get them to see, hey, this is worth it. But getting them to really buy in for that initial part of me kind of being left alone, because I didn't do any manual testing. My job was just to do everything I could to automate, what we had. And once I was able to prove that from a financial standpoint and show them that we were able to do it faster and for less money, that was really the big impact that allowed us to be able to make it like a huge part of who we are now at our company with the automation.
So it does look like you had not only the, hey, I have to show that this work, but also I have to show that this is like the economics of this makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, the investment wasn't going to be worth it, regardless of how fast you could do it.
Yeah, and with a business, and that's ultimately what they're going to want to see a lot of times, right? I mean, it really comes down to how can we save the company money by doing this. So yeah, that was it for me. Alex, I don't know what you have, but
what misconceptions did you face, Alex, when you were trying to, I mean, there is a technology, I don't recall the name right now, that both of you mentioned at the very beginning, but as you were learning and implementing these things, did you find anything that or was there any objections really when you were trying to adopt it or implement it?
Yeah, so I'd say the common misconception at the time when I was starting was that we could automate everything.
Oh, yeah.
So right,
yeah,
it's like, oh great, so this tool can can run everything that we're doing manually, and it can basically, like, we'll be able to test everything super quick. And then initially, as we were learning as well, like, yeah, I think so. So we would create tests, and Dave, you'll probably relate to it, but like we would create tests, like huge tests full of conditions, like if then else,
Oh yeah.
and then choose this and choose that, and it worked. It could make it work, but then very quickly, when there were failures in the application that caused the automated tests to fail, we would go like, okay, so why did it fail? Like, which functionality actually is not working? Because our tests automated so many things that we literally had to not troubleshoot, but triage the test itself to find which part of the application was throwing the error. And so very quickly we learned, okay, automation is not just about automation. There's more about test strategy than
Mm-hmm.
actually automating, right? So then we very quickly learned that, okay, each automated test should result in one, or should create one result, right, for one functionality, like atomic test, basically, right? And then that helped us drive the test strategy for the overall automation effort. And then as we started learning about how to do that, we found ourselves working a lot closer with the manual testing team, and also with the test lead, to make sure, hey, does this even make sense to automate, or is this one of those, I don't know, admin areas of the application that is never going to change in the foreseeable future? So why would we spend time automating that? Or no, maybe it will change the surrounding areas, so it's important for us to have that automated because of regression concerns,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it started helping us drive the strategy around testing as a whole, and specifically about automation. That was a big misconception. It's not because you can that you actually should. So that was a valuable lesson learned that cost us a lot of wasted, well, not wasted, but like a lot of time that we spent, and then eventually we learned.
Yeah, what I had to do too was another misconception was, oh, well, you can just build the scripts into this environment. And there were people that were in that environment. So it wasn't just me. And so, what I had to learn to do was kind of get the company to see I need my own completely separate environment that no one else will be touching. Because, we had a very configurable application. And so they could come along and completely remove or add new things, and that was breaking the test too. So initially I had started creating them within the system that everybody was testing against, and had to say, I'm going to need like my completely own separate environment that's completely clean, that no one's going to be in. And that has been crucial. And then, like what you said, Alex, was initially I wrote those scripts that were, 200, 300, however, I don't know, however many hundreds of lines of code. And then you learned that you had to make those smaller. And then the other important piece was learning how to either create like a reusable test that you could call, things that you found that were going to be used on a regular basis, or in some cases, because regardless of how much we'd like for an application to stay the same, there's going to be enhancements that are going to change. And so learning how to create these chunks, reusable tests, or you could call, the keyword, the methods, or something like that, to where you could only have to make a change once, and then it would be pushed out to every other test that called that, was also another like important piece in learning how to write them in a way, because maintenance is a huge part of automation. It's not just about going out and writing the scripts and then, that's it. You never have to worry about that one again. We're just going to keep creating new ones. It's like, no, there's a maintenance aspect. So learning how to write the scripts in a way that if you notice an area that's going to have possible more changes or something like that, it's better to have those smaller reusable test chunks that you only have to make that call once, or make that change once, and you don't have to worry about going and trying to change it in 15 other places. That was another thing that I learned along the way that was important for making maintenance easier anyway. Because you had said, Alex, we had these huge scripts with all these conditional statements, and then that one area would break. And, and if you had like a bunch of tests that were like that, you'd have to go and find that chunk of code in every single one of those and make that. So that was another thing that took time for me to learn as well. So. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it looks like if we categorize I guess the misconceptions is that first is it looks like, David, the first one that you faced was this is not going to work.
Yeah.
The second one, Alex, it looks like is like, oh, automation will solve for everything. And also what I'm learning from David is the third one sounds like a misconception would have been like, okay, you automate it and it's one and done.
Yeah.
And, now you're going to let it run and you don't have to touch that again. But it looks like, ironically, automation sounds like it also needs some human supervision.
Oh, 100%.
And in this case, it would be maintenance, right? Making sure that things don't break.
I mean, what I found is you definitely want to make sure that the area of the code that you're automating is at some, for lack of a better word, sound. Like it's not going to have a lot more changes coming down the pipe. I have found it's better to wait if you know that there's an area of the code that's being worked on that's going to have a lot of changes, to just wait on that automation so that you're not having to write that script or maintain it over and over and over again because they keep making changes to it. So that was another thing that I learned as well, was sometimes it's better to just hold off on an area that is going to have drastic changes to it until that code gets a little bit more solid and sound.